Today, BMW announced a brand new scramblery version of their R12 retro platform, and it has to be said, it looks very nice indeed and actually looks like it could be pretty capable off-road. So in this video, we'll go through all of the details with the 10 key things that you need to know about it. So let's start with the engine, which is the same 1170cc air and oil-cooled boxer twin as their other retros, so the R12 Cruiser and the R12 90 Sporty Naked. You could say that's a good thing though, because it makes a really quite handy 109 horsepower at a fairly low 7,000 RPM, and torque is also plentiful too, with 115 Newton meters at 6,500. So it's a really usable engine that always has plenty of shove on tap. There's an accessory quick shifter as well for clutchless up and down shifts. Naturally, you've got that distinctive BMW Boxer sound, which helps it stand out from some of the other parallel twins on the retro market. And then the shaft drive as well is a nice practical bonus. For this R12 GS though, nothing particularly separates the engine from the others, apart from perhaps the exhaust system, which is high mounted at the silencer, which is, fitting for the rest of the visuals and also kind of handy if you do go off-road. In fact, like I said in the intro, it does seem as though BMW have truly built this bike with some serious dirt riding in mind, which is sometimes, not the case when it comes to the retro scrambler market. I guess the lineage of this R12 GS can be traced back to their legendary Paris-Dakar winning R80 GS of the 1980s. You can see that just from looking at the bike with the aesthetics paying homage. And so really, this R12 GS kind of has to perform in that regard to be a worthy tribute. Now, their intent is shown to some extent with the selection of riding modes, because you've not only got the regular rain and road, but also an enduro mode comes as standard too. And then there's the option to pay a little bit more for their Enduro pack, which opens up Enduro Pro, which offers even more aggression. I'm sure you can gather that the rain mode is for riding in the wet on tarmac, road is for when it's dry, but Enduro is said to give a smooth throttle response, so potentially a bit like the rain mode, but then wheelie control, drag torque control, and traction control are there but with minimal intervention. Then the ABS is switched on, but it does allow for a little bit more slip at the rear wheel. Enduro Pro, on the other hand, has a more direct throttle response, which they say is much more like the road mode, so ideal for those more experienced riders who might be able to use the benefits of being able to spin the rear wheel up. And then traction control and front wheel ABS give very little intervention, while they say the rest of the rider aids are off, including ABS at the rear being fully disabled. Now, when they designed this new generation of R12 to replace the previous gen R9T, they did say they wanted to make it kind of modular and adaptable, so it could be tailored effectively for different styles of riding. So whilst the tubular bridge steel frame is essentially the same as the R12 Cruiser and the R12 90, the bolt and subframe is different and specific to this model. It allows them, of course, to boost up the seat height to give you a much more appropriate riding position for off-road, and also make that transition between sitting and standing that little bit easier. A side benefit though, I guess, of having this bolt on subframe is that if you do damage it riding off-road, it won't write the whole bike off. And so again, another feature that does play into this bike being fairly off-road capable. Now, the geometry of the main frame is, however, ever so slightly tweaked, with, they say, a higher and further forward steering head, so that's going to bring the handlebar height up, as well as accommodate more suspension travel, that bigger front wheel, but also it gives it more steering angle than the other R12 bikes, so it's 42 degrees, which of course is going to come in handy with tricky, tight off-road riding. Speaking of the wheels, well, it's a full-on 21-incher up front with a 17 at the rear as standard. Both of them are spoked, and while the press release doesn't explicitly state it, from the pictures and the fact that they're laced to the edges, I guess that the tyres are tubeless. Now, tyres typically with BMW vary by market, so it depends where you buy the bike as to whether you get Metzlers or Pirellis or Bridgestones or whatever. But the press shots do show it with two different styles of tyre, one being more of an adventure touring tyre and the other being a bit more knobbly and aggressive, and that's usually an option when it comes to configuring your BMW. Then, On top of that, there's also the option to fit their Enduro pack, and one of the features that gives you is a larger 18-inch rear wheel, and so that should give you even more off-road performance and potentially a greater selection of even more aggressive tyres in combination with that 21-inch front. It's stuff like this that really does separate it from something like the Urban GS, which was effectively the equivalent for the previous generation R90 lineup. That bike was fairly low slung, didn't have a great deal of suspension travel and ground clearance, and also had the 19-inch front wheel and a riding position that was, mostly set up for seated riding. Although you could argue they did kind of warn us with the name. On to the suspension though, and you get a fully adjustable 45mm upside down fork up front, a fully adjustable monoshock at the rear, and there's a decent 210mm of travel up front and 200mm on the shock. Ground clearance as such stands at an impressive 240mm, but this goes up to 255 with that Enduro pack, which along with the bigger wheel gives you the off-road tyres, grippier foot pegs, a sump guard, hand guards, a 20mm bar riser, and a longer kickstand to accommodate that extra height. Now, whilst top spec monoblock radially mounted brake calipers might look more impressive and fancy, this bike goes with the humble 2-pot Brembos, which could be seen as another indication of their ambitions to make a decent off-roader. On twin 310mm discs, these should offer a little bit more of a gradual delivery of braking versus something more sporty. And so for a lot of riders, that's actually preferable when you're searching for grip when you're riding on loose surfaces. Plus, you only have to look at some of the more off-road capable adventure bikes like the Tenere 700 to see, similar setups. As for the seat height, well, the bike comes in standard form with a solo seat and no passenger pegs, and it sits pretty tall at 860mm. You can spec it up with a pillion pack that gets you a twin seat and passenger pegs, and of course that one comes in at the same 860, but then if you do want something that makes it very easy to go between seating and standing, then there is a rally seat, and that boosts it up by another 15mm, which makes it 875. I should add though, you might have already figured this out, that adding that 18-inch rear wheel if you do fit the Enduro pack, well that's another 20mm on the seat height, and so that takes you up to 880 with the solo seat or the passenger seat, or 895 with the rally seat, which really is on the tall side, and it isn't a particularly light bike either at 229 kilograms curb. So if you are a bit short of leg or potentially not that confident on tall bikes, then you might want to avoid the rally seat and Enduro pack. So yeah, no pillion pegs as standard. They do come with the passenger or pillion pack and the Enduro pack, and then that Enduro pack also gets you some bigger, grippier foot pegs, as you'd imagine, for more purchase off-road, an adjustable rear brake lever that goes between two positions, so again you can get that dialed into your particular taste, and the higher up handlebars that I've mentioned. So although you can kind of pivot the bars back and forth, those risers will give you another 20mm height, which is going to make it feel much more natural when you're standing up. All of them though get some eyelets on the frame to attach some luggage. I believe there's some tie down points on the pillion peg mounts as well if you do fit those, and also a couple of straps on the underside of the solo seat. So again, there should be plenty of options if you are intending to fit some soft luggage. Now, in terms of the tech, I really like that they've gone down the same route as the other R12 models in that they fitted it as standard with a single analog clock that I think a lot of people are going to prefer when it comes to a retro-looking bike. It does, however, come with a 12-volt socket, so you can plug in your gadgets or your phone if you've got it mounted on the bars. But if you do want something a bit more modern looking or potentially a bit more custom looking, then you can pay for their micro TFT, which if I remember correctly isn't too expensive. I think it's about 100 quid to get that fitted. And it does give you something that's quite easy to read and potentially I think gives you a touch more functionality as well. Through either though, you can manage those standard riding modes that are included and all the rider aids that come with this bike. And there's also keyless ignition as standard, although it doesn't include the filler cap and the steering lock. Tire pressure monitoring is an option, and it can also be disabled in the Enduro mode if you do want to run lower pressures. And then their emergency SOS button that goes on the bars and contacts their call center if you do have a spill, that's an option. As is an adaptive headlight that sort of bends into corners so you've got better visibility of the road at night, and hill start control. Although if you're intending to take this bike off-road, I'd hope you've mastered hill starts before you set off. For now, it comes in 3 color options. So the base model is black, perhaps a little too plain looking for me, but potentially a good base if you want to customize yourself or get your own paint job. Then there's the white with the M Sport colors, which is always going to go down well on a BMW of this nature, and it's probably the one that has the closest resemblance to the R12 GS. And then as always, you've got the Option 719 Premium version, which is going to be the most pricey, with a sort of goldy sand color and some black and red graphics, and then also red paint on the frame. Although I'd probably say the white is the one that I'd pick, so let me know which you'd pick down in the comments. Now, I'm told bikes will be available in the UK this summer, and the starting price will be 14,085 quid. So for reference, that's a couple of grand more than the base R12 Cruiser, and pretty much the same price as the R12 9T Sporty Naked, which is probably to be expected because they're quite similar in terms of the level of spec and features. Undoubtedly, the main competitor for this bike though is going to be the Triumph Scrambler 1200, and I guess one of the advantages of that bike is that they do sell it in the slightly more affordable lower slung spec now called the X, which comes in at £11,895, so 2.5 grand cheaper, and probably a good one to go for if you're not realistically going to go off-road. More similar though to this bike is the taller XE model. It matches up better in terms of, you know, spec for spec and feature for feature. Well, that one's still cheaper as well, by over £1,000. It comes in at 13,295. So yes, this BM is a little on the expensive side, but potentially it could be worth it. I guess it all comes down to the riding when we actually get to review one and sample the delights both on and off road. In the meantime though, do let me know what you think of it down in the comments below, and whether they've actually got the balance right of kind of off-road ability and cool retro looks, or do you think they've built something that no one's realistically going to use off-road because it is still fairly weighty and still expensive as well? Potentially for the hardcore off-roaders, the upcoming F450 GS, much lighter, much cheaper, will be a better option, but it definitely won't be as good looking as this, nor will it be as good looking, I don't think, as those Triumphs. Speaking of which, if you want to see our full review of those, I'll put it on the screen now so you can give it a watch if you haven't already. Do hit subscribe for more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.